Law of Silver, please. Yesterday we were talking about reading literature, and today I talk about how to read different types of literature or how to teach different types of literature at secondary level. What are the techniques of teaching poetry, techniques of teaching essay, techniques of teaching drama, and techniques of teaching story in your secondary level? What do you need to do as a teacher while teaching these four different literatures? First of all, you have to keep in your mind, तपाईले माइन्डमा एउटा कुरा के राख्नु भने जस्तो म एउटा एउटा लिटरेचर पढाउँछु, how to teach poetry, how to teach poetry, how to teach poetry. Definitely, whenever you enter the classroom, when you enter the classroom, you have to teach poetry. And before you teach poetry, you must know the elements of poetry. Yesterday we talked, poetry is complex, it is compact, it is unique in expression, poetry is rich in vocabulary, poetry is always multiple in providing its meaning, poetry contains musical element, poetry is written in verse, and in poetry, students are to deal with some musical elements like rhyme, rhythm, and alliteration. Whenever, as an English teacher, you enter your classroom, you are to make your students do certain activities for reading poetry. As a teacher, you teach poetry, and your students they read poetry. इसलिए यहाँ दुईटा शब्द याद गर्नुपर्छ, how to teach poetry and how to read poetry. Every literature, it has certain elements, and you need to consider those elements, and you must teach your student to look at those elements as well. That's why how to teach poetry भन्दा पहिलो कुरा हामीले एक लाइन मात्र के गर्नु त पोएट्री को डेफिनेसन लेखौं, अनि यसको प्री एक्टिभिटीज, पोस्ट एक्टिभिटीज एन्ड वाइल एक्टिभिटीज. हामीले के भन्यौ त भन्दाखेरि पोएट्री इज अ complex and compact form of literature. Complex and compact form of literature. Poetry is a complex and compact form of literature written in verse, and arranged in stanza. Unlike other literature written in prose form, unlike other literatures which are written in prose form, unlike other literatures written in prose form, unlike other literatures written in prose form, prose form मा लेखिएका अरु साहित्य भन्दा it contains musical elements. It contains musical elements, that is figure of speech, figures of speech, creative use of language, and multiple contexts and meanings. Multiple meanings and contexts. Teaching poetry is really a problematic thing. Poetry को कुरा गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ poetry is a complex and compact form of literature. It is written in verse. It is a complex and compact form of literature which is written in verse and arranged in stanzas. It is arranged in stanzas. अनि यो एउटा लाइन भए पुग्छ. Unlike other literatures written in prose form, it contains musical elements. In poetry, we find rhyme, we find rhythm, we find alliteration, we find assonance, we find allusion. There are different musical elements that we find in poetry. Figures of speech, yesterday we talked, creative use of language, and multiple meanings and context. एक भन्दा बढी meaning र एक भन्दा बढी सन्दर्भहरू that we find in poetry. If it is so, how to teach poetry? त्यसो हो भने कविता कसरी पढाउने? How to teach poetry? How to teach poetry? The first thing is that whenever you come to teach poetry, do not jump directly into poetry, because students do not make a sense of poetry. In poetry, you don't find ordinary direct language. Poetry को एउटा bigger problem के भने we don't find standard language in poetry. Standard language, complete sentence and clear meaning र direct meaning हुँदैन. त्यसैले पोएट्री पढ्दा के सेन्सिटिभ हुनुपर्छ भने we should be sensitive. We should be sensitive. We should be sensitive while teaching poetry. We should be sensitive while teaching poetry, because its language is non-standard. यसको language non-standard हुन्छ, deviated from grammar rules and experimental, and often experimental. अनि यो जहिले पनि के हुन्छ त भन्दा and often experimental. EXPERIMENTAL. We should be sensitive while teaching poetry because its language is non-standard, deviated from grammar rules and often experimental. त्यसैले टिचरहरु के गर्नुपर्छ त? अब प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज के हुन्छ? What are the pre-reading activities? ग्रामर किन पोएट्री पढाउने बेलामा तपाई सेन्सिटिभ हुनु पर्यो भन्दा poetry is complex, you know it. Poetry is compact. Poetry is a unique form of literature. Every poetry is unique. Every poetry has its own style, and whenever you begin to teach poetry, your students do not make a sense of it. विद्यार्थीहरुले यसको अर्थ नै बुझ्दैनन्. किन त? कविता भर्समा लेखिन्छ, कवितामा स्टेन्जा हुन्छ, कवितामा राइमहरु हुन्छन्, कविताका शब्दहरु दे प्रोवाइड मल्टिपल मिनिङ्स, अनि कविताको वाक्य कम्प्लिट हुँदैन. You don't find subject verb object arrangement in the line of a poem. I eat rice भनेर कविता लेखिन्न. Sometimes rice I eat भनेर लेखिन्छ, rice eat I भनेर लेखिन्छ, कहिलेकाहीँ eat rice I भनेर लेखिन्छ. That's why whenever our students they begin to read any poem, they find language non-standard. That is not standard day-to-day language. It is deviated from grammar rules and it is often experimental. That's why how to teach them. अब कसरी पढाउने त? How to teach भन्ने कुरालाई पनि हैन त्यो ध्यान दिनु पर्यो. पहिलो कुरा हामीले के फोकस गर्नुपर्छ भने how to read भन्दा one thing is how to handle these things. कसरी पढ्ने कसरी पढाउने भन्ने कुरा you must make a sense. First thing is that provide. अब पहिला प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज भनेको किताबमा छिर्नु भन्दा अगाडि तपाईहरु किताब पोएट्री पोएम पढाउनु भन्दा अगाडि के गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ? प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज भनेको बिफोर रिडिङ पोएट्री. नोट्समा तपाईहरु त्यहाँ हेर्नुस् त प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज अर्थात हामी यसलाई के भन्छौं? प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज. प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीजमा के पर्छ? व्हाट विल बी देयर इन प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज? प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज means first thing is provide necessary information about. पहिलो कुरा त टाइटलबाट सुरु गरे पनि हुन्छ. स्टेप 1 जे भए पनि के भएन. Have discussion about title of the poem. Briefly talk about poet. Briefly talk about the poet and context of the poem. Briefly talk about the poet and the context of poem and the context. त्यसपछि ask students to predict idea and theme of poem. टाइटल हेरेको भरमा विद्यार्थीहरुलाई यसको थीम प्रेडिक्ट गर्न नआउँछ. Have discussion about title of the poem. Briefly talk about the poet and the context. Ask students to predict idea and theme of the poem. Idea and theme of the poem. Try to imagine the situation of the poem. Try to imagine the situation of the poem. Talk about similar things like that of the poem's ideas or themes. Poems, ideas and themes. हामीले कविता पढाउनु भन्दा अगाडि के गर्ने? What do we need to do before we begin to teach any poetry? Have discussion about title of the poem. Whenever you begin to teach any poetry, तपाईले कुनै कविता पढाउन सुरु गर्नु अगाडि you need to have discussion about the title of the poem. Title is the first impression. Every title signals something, and whenever you begin to teach any poem, you need to ask your student, my dear student, मेरो विद्यार्थीहरु ल सब शीर्षक हेर्नुस् त भन्नु पर्यो. जस्तो अहिले एउटा बजारमा फिल्म चलेको छ, जारी भन्ने फिल्म चलिरहेको छ. What might be the story of that movie? Jari means it is a story about a particular ethnic group of Nepal. You can imagine it. That's why before you start teaching poetry, you know that poetry is complex. You keep in your mind that poetry is different. It is deviated. It is non-standard in language. It is often experimental. It has musical elements. It is written in stanza. It is composed in verse, and it is not easier in understanding, and it is hard in its comprehension ability. That's why have discussion about the title of the poem. Briefly talk about the poet and the context. Ask students to predict idea and theme of the poem. Try to imagine the situation of the poem and talk about similar things like that of the poem's ideas and themes. कविताको विषयवस्तुसँग मिल्ने टपिक रहेछ भने सुरुमै गफ गरिदिनुस्. यदि कविता किसानको बारेमा छ भने if any poem is about the life of a farmer, you begin to or you can have conversation about farmer. Which farmer? What makes someone farmer? What are the living conditions of farmer? What makes one farmer? And how a farmer is different from other professions. That kind of conversation or that kind of pre-reading activities you can launch, you can conduct in your classroom while planning, while designing, and while conducting real teaching learning activities during your teaching session. That's why pre-reading activities मा चाहिँ यो कुराहरु हामी प्र्याक्टिस गर्छौं. Now you go start teaching. अब तपाईले कविता पढाउनु पर्यो भने सुरुमा दुईचोटी कविता पढ्नुस्. Ask your student to underline tough words, explain the meaning of poem, provide meaning of the words. अब हामीले 6 वटा कुराहरु हेर्नुपर्छ. यो कुनै पनि लिटरेचर पढाउँदाखेरि 4 वटा स्किल, 3 टा एस्पेक्ट, ग्रामर, भोक्याबुलरी एन्ड पंक्चुएसन, 3 टा. र त्यो 7 वटाको एउटा वाक्य लेख्नु भने क्लियर हुन्छ. जस्तो अब while reading भनेपछि के गर्नु पर्यो? While reading activities. अब पढ्दाखेरि के गर्ने? While reading activities. While reading activities. While reading activities. अब कविता पढाउँदै हुनुहुन्छ. अब जे लेखे पनि हुन्छ यही. There are no fixed steps there. Read out poetry twice. Read out poem twice, line by line. Line by line. पहिलो कुरा थियो. त्यसपछि ask your students to underline tough words. तपाई आफ्नो विद्यार्थीलाई टफ वर्ड अन्डरलाइन गर, म पछि आन्सर भनिदिन्छु भन्नुपर्छ. Ask your students to underline tough words. Ask your students to underline top words. Ask your students to understand top words. तपाई आफ्नो विद्यार्थीहरुलाई चाहिँ top words underline गर्नुहोस्. त्यसपछि provide clear meaning of every words. सुरुमा तपाईले vocabulary पढाउनुस्. Clear meaning of every word. विद्यार्थीलाई सबै शब्दको अर्थ बताउनुस्. त्यसपछि provide clear meaning of every word. Then clarify meaning of the poem. Clarify meaning of the poem. Poem को meaning clarify गर्नुस्. Clarify meaning of the poem. Explore theme of the poem. कविता को theme explore गर्नुस्. Explore and interpret theme of the poem. Theme of the poem. Discuss major words related to theme. Related to theme. Consider musical elements. Consider musical elements like rhyme, rhythm. State the role of figure of speech, if there are any. State the roles of figures of speech. State the roles of figure of speech. How to teach poetry? Read out poet twice, line by line to line poem पढ्दिनुस्. Ask your student to underline top words. Provide clear meaning of every word. Provide clear meaning of every word. Clarify meaning of the poem. Explore and interpret theme of the poem. Discuss major words related to theme. Consider musical elements like rhythm and rhyme. State the roles of figures of speech. Whenever you begin to teach poetry, तपाई कविता पढाइरहँदाखेरि as a teacher, what are your major duties and responsibilities? Poetry is tough, you know that. That's why you read out poem twice, line by line. दुई पटक तपाई line to line कविता पढ्दिनुस्. अनि के गर्नुस् विद्यार्थीलाई, whenever you are teaching poetry, विद्यार्थीलाई भन्नुस् कि I am reading it, I am reading out for you, and you please go on underlining the tough words about which you are unknown. That's why ask your student to underline tough words, and whenever they complete underlining those tough words, now your task is provide clear meaning of all those tough words. Now clarify meaning of the poem. It is your duty to clarify meaning of the poem. Next one is explore and interpret theme of the poem. A poem can carry multiple themes or ideas, but first you just explain one meaning. You just provide single meaning. That is, explore and interpret theme of the poem. Discuss major words related to theme. In the poem, there you may find some catchy words, some words that contain the entire meaning of the poem. Two catchy words like hearnus. Discuss major words related to theme. Consider musical elements. In your poem, you may find rhyme, rhythm, alliteration, assonance, imagery, allusion. You may find these kind of things. Now consider musical elements like rhyme, rhythm. State the roles of figures of speech. Ani figures of speech like के गर्नु त state गर्नुस्. अनि पढाउँदा पढाउँदै के गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ त भन्दाखेरि अनि teach your student to pronounce. विद्यार्थीलाई pronounce गर्न पनि सिकाउनुस्. Teach your students to pronounce some tough words. To pronounce words. Ask student to see placement of punctuations. Placement of punctuation marks. यसरी हामीले के गर्न सक्छौं त while reading poetry we need to do it अनि अन्तिममा हामी के गर्दिन्छौं त भन्दाखेरि provide multiple meanings if it has any यदि योसँग कुनै पनि मल्टिपल मिनिङ छ भने provide multiple meanings if it has any अब तपाईले के गर्नु पर्यो त पोस्ट रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज हाउ टु डु पोस्ट रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज अबको कुरा गरौं पोस्ट रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज कविता पढिसक्यो you completed reading out poetry you provided meaning of the poem to your students अब तपाईले आफ्नो विद्यार्थीलाई के गर्नु पर्यो त teach your students to pronounce words ask students to seek placement of punctuation marks and provide multiple meanings if it has any भनेपछि हामी तपाईहरुले कसरी पढाइरहनु भएको छ स्कुलमा follow the same steps how you are teaching at your school level follow the same steps तपाईहरु त्यही steps follow गर्नुस् teach your students to pronounce words पढाइरहेको बेलामा विद्यार्थीलाई केही शब्द pronounce गर्न आउँछ and also ask them to look at punctuation vocabulary listening अब स्पीकिङ तपाईले गरिहाल्नु भो अब एक्टिभिटीज भनेको चाहिँ विद्यार्थीलाई लगाउने पोस्ट रिडिङ भनेको as soon as you complete your teaching now you need to involve your students अब विद्यार्थीले के गर्ने विद्यार्थीको काम के हो ask question related to poem ask your student to read out the poem ask your student to write summary of the poem ask your students to present a paper on poem तपाईका विद्यार्थीहरुले के गर्ने त हो मैले पढाइसकेपछि तपाईहरुले के गर्नुपर्छ as soon as I complete teaching to you it is your task to do some evaluation related works अब हामी के गर्छौं त भन्दा पोस्ट रिडिङ भनेको पढिसकेपछि चाहिँ इभ्यालुएसन स्टुडेन्ट इन्भल्भमेन्ट क्लासरुम एक्टिभिटीज पढाइसकेपछि चाहिँ के हुन्छ इभ्यालुएसन रिलेटेड वर्क्स स्टुडेन्ट सेन्टर्ड एक्टिभिटीज क्लासरुम एक्टिभिटीज एन्ड स्टुडेन्ट एक्टिभिटीज अब चारवटा एक्टिभिटीज हुन्छ सबैमा त्यही प्याटर्न हो टिचरले पढाइसकेपछि प्री रिडिङ भनेको पढाउनु भन्दा अगाडि किताब भन्दा बाहिर बिफोर कन्टेन्ट or pre-reading activities that are not related to content they are close to content but that are not closely related to content and post reading bhaneko you completed the topic now you want to evaluate your students now you involve your students in activities अब यसलाई हामी के भनौं त भन्दाखेरि पोस्ट रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज मा के पर्छ त अब यहाँ जे लेखे पनि भयो ask your students some meanings पहिला अब तपाईहरुले विद्यार्थीलाई पोएम पढ्न लगाए पनि हुन्छ ल पहिलो हामीले के गर्छौं त यहाँ भन्दाखेरि ask students to read out poems विद्यार्थीलाई कविता पढ्न लगाऊ पहिलो कुरा यो त्यसपछि provide meaning of top words ask students to summarize your writing ma parcha to summarize the idea of poem provide some questions to students विद्यार्थीलाई केही क्वेशन्स दिनुस् प्रोवाइड सम क्वेशन्स टु स्टुडेन्ट्स विद्यार्थीलाई केही क्वेशन्सहरु दिनुस् यस्तो खालको एक्टिभिटीजहरुलाई हामी के भन्छौं त प्रोवाइड सम क्वेशन्स टु स्टुडेन्ट्स अब विद्यार्थीहरुलाई केही न केही क्वेशन्सहरु दिनु पर्यो त्यसैले हामीले के भन्छौं त भन्दा यो एक्टिभिटीजमा चाहिँ debate on various themes of poem अब पोएटहरुको थीम को बारेमा कुरा गरौं debate on various themes of poem themes of ल यति कुराहरु गरियो भने अब धेरै लेख्नु पर्दैन asks students to read out poems, provide meaning of top words, asks students to summarize the idea of a poem, provide some questions to students, and debate on various themes of poems. In this way, debate on various themes of poem. In this way, you can teach poetry. तपाईले यो आधारबाट के गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ त पोएट्री पढाउन सक्नुहुन्छ. Debate on various themes of poem, ask students to read out poems, provide meaning of top words, ask students to summarize the idea of the poem, provide some questions to students, and organize classroom discussion. Post reading भनेको पढाइसकेपछि student evaluation, classroom activities, and other homework or assignment. Post reading भनेको चारवटा हो. त्यसैले ask students to read out poems, provide meaning of top words, ask students to summarize the idea of poem, provide some questions to students. Provide some questions to students. अब यो post reading activities र pre reading activities सधैँ एउटै हुन्छ. याद गर्ने एउटा कुरा. Pre reading र post reading, they are always common. सबैमा सेम हुन्छ. In all literature you find them common. तपाईले सबै लिटरेचरमा you find them common. सबैमा कमन हुन्छ है. त्यो कुरालाई तपाईहरु याद गर्नु. अर्को हेरौं अब now see. अब how to read story. Teaching story at secondary level. कसरी पढाउनु हुन्छ स्कुल लेभल. Teaching story at secondary level. Teaching story at secondary level. एक second. First of all, write down the definition of poetry. Story. Story भनेको के हो? Story is a form of literature. Story एउटा साहित्यको स्वरूप हो. Story is a form of literature. It includes योसँग के हुन्छ? It includes plot, character. It includes plot, character, atmosphere, setting, plot, character, setting, and यस्तो कुराहरु चाहिँ हुन्छ. ल अब स्पेक्टेकल यसमा हुँदैन and setting मात्र. It includes plot, character, atmosphere, setting. Story is an imagined form of, यो पनि a kind of fiction. A kind of story is a kind of fiction. Story is a kind of fiction which provides an imagined account of people's social and psychological life. People's social and psychological life in a particular context of living. In a particular context of living. अब हामीले के गर्यौं त यो कुराहरु पहिला यति भन्दा नलेख्ने. Story is a form of literature. It includes plot, character, atmosphere, and setting. Story is a kind of fiction which provides an imagined account of people's social and psychological lives in a particular context of living. मान्छेको सामाजिक र मनोवैज्ञानिक जीवनलाई एउटा कल्पना गरिएको घटनामा त्यो पनि एउटा विशेष परिस्थितिमा उतार्ने काम कथाले गर्छ. Story is a kind of fiction. It is a kind of fiction which provides an imagined account of people's social and psychological lives in a particular context of living. मान्छेको जीवनमा कसरी बाँचिरहेका छन् त? How people are living their life. What is this particular setting of living? गुरुप्रसाद मैनालीको छिमेकी कथामा के छ? There is a village life. Rural living is there. people are involved in farming, and one bull of Gumane or Dhanjite, it destroyed the field हैन, त्यो खेत डिस्ट्रोय गर्दैन, त्यस्तै त्यस्तै के कथा थियो मैले बिर्सेँ। त्यो धन्जिते कथाहरू गुमाने कथाहरू के हुन् त भन्दाखेरि that are about rural setting of Nepal, त्यो नेपालको rural setting को बारेमा थियो। त्यसैले story is an imagined form of human living. It imagines human life in different context or mode of living. That's why story has plot, character, atmosphere and setting. अब तपाईले पढाउँदाखेरि के गर्नुपर्छ त भन्दाखेरि पढाउँदाखेरि चाहिँ how to teach story. स्टोरी पढाउँदाखेरि पनि सुरुमा टाइटल हेर्ने, टक अबाउट, अब स्टोरीका त शब्द अन्डरलाइन गर्नुस् भन्न पाइएन। पहिलो कुरा त के हुन्छ भने डिफाइन एन्ड डिस्कस टाइटल। अब हाउ टु टीच पोएट्री, टीचिङ पोएट्री अर रिडिङ स्टोरी भनौं, सरी रिडिङ स्टोरी, प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज, प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज, प्री रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज कसरी पढ्ने त? What are pre-reading activities? Pre-reading activities में के पर्छ त? First thing हेरौं त, pre-reading activities same one, अघि पोएट्री में जे लेखेको थियो त्यही कुरा गर्नुस्। सुरुमा विद्यार्थीलाई के गर्नुस् त? डिफाइन एन्ड डिस्कस द टाइटल, टाइटल को डिस्कस गर्नुस्। सुरुमा पढाउनु भन्दा अगाडि डिफाइन एन्ड डिस्कस टाइटल, डिस्कस the title. शुरू में न पढ़ाऊंगा, define and discuss the title. Second one is writer के बारे में भन्न मन लाग्छ भने tell briefly about story writer. Tell briefly about story writer. Introduce the context of story. कथाको कन्टेक्स्ट इंट्रोड्यूस गर्नुस्। Introduce the context of story. Introduce the context of story. You need to introduce the context of story. Pre-reading activities. Define and discuss the title. Tell briefly about story writer. कथा भन्ने मान्छेको बारेमा ब्रिफली भन्नुस्। Introduce the context of story. Story को context लाई introduce गर्नुस्। Introduce the context of story. Introduce the context of story. Introduce the context of story. Next one is अब त्यसपछि explain about similar issue of the story. Talk briefly about the context of story relating to your social life, relating to your own context. नेपालको सन्दर्भमा कथाको सन्दर्भलाई भन्नु पर्यो। Define and discuss the title. Tell briefly about story writer. Introduce the context of story. Explain about similar issues of the story. Talk briefly about the context of the story, relating it to your own context. तपाईले कथाको सन्दर्भलाई आफ्नो सन्दर्भमा म्याचिङ गर्नुस्। अनि यस्तो कुरालाई हामी सुरुमा गर्छौं। त्यसैले अर्को कुरा भनेको चाहिँ briefly explain professions or character. त्यो क्यारेक्टरहरुको टाइप्स को कुरा गरौँ। Talk about character types. Talk about character types. In human society. मान्छेको समाजमा कस्ता कस्ता मान्छेहरु हुन्छन् त्यो कथामा दिएका कलाकारहरु जस्तो तपाईले डिस्कसन गर्नुस्। Define and discuss the title of the story. Tell briefly about story writer. Introduce the context of story. You need to introduce context of story. Explain about similar issue of the story. Talk briefly about the context of story, relating it to your own context, and talk about character types in human society. तपाईको कथामा जस्तो खालको मान्छे छ त्यस्तै कुरा गर्नुस्। यदि कथा if your story is related to lawyer, यदि तपाईको कथा lawyer को बारेमा छ भने विद्यार्थीलाई सुरुमै भन्नुस्, do you know about lawyer? What is the profession of lawyer? What do lawyers do? What is the role of lawyer in human society? Who becomes lawyer? And what are the educational qualifications required to be a lawyer? That's why you need to introduce every character type before you start teaching any particular story. Story has plot, story has character, story has certain setting, and story is created on a particular atmosphere. And story is such a form of an imagined literature which puts people in different social, cultural, and psychological modes of living. That's why whenever you are teaching any particular story, you teach it for different purposes. You not only try to teach them language. तपाईले स्टोरी पढाउँदाखेरि किन पढाउनुहुन्छ? हामी एजुकेसनका विद्यार्थीहरू ज्ञानका लागि पढाउँदैनौँ. बीएड एजुकेसन इज ओन्ली फर एजुकेसन. बीएड भनेको एजुकेसनको लागि मात्रै हो. त्यसैले हामी विद्यार्थीलाई के सिकाउँछौँ भन्दाखेरि सेन्टेन्स टाइप, वर्ड, भोक्याबुलरी, पंक्चुएसन, वर्ड अर्डर, ग्रामर स्ट्रक्चर. यू नट ओन्ली टिच स्टोरी. ह्युम्यानिटिज पढ्ने विद्यार्थीहरू बीए मेजर इङ्ग्लिस पढ्नेहरूले चाहिँ शब्दै हेर्दैनन्, आँखै हेर्दैनन्. तिनीहरू आकाशै हुन्छन्, आकाशतिर हेरेर थीम लेख्छन्. तर whenever you teach story to your school level students, you not only pay attention to ideas, theme, question, answer, and the central idea, मुख्य idea, विचार, सिकाइ, moral theme. You not only consider those things: morality, moral theme, education, question answer, summary writing, note making, paraphrasing. You can involve your students in different activities, but always keep in mind that you are a school teacher and you must involve your students in language activities. Language activities mean what you see in story: long sentences, short sentences, adjective, adverb, part of speech, passive sentences. कतिवटा sentence passive छन्, कतिवटा sentence active छन्. Which one is passive? And by teaching story, you can also teach preposition. तपाईले विद्यार्थीलाई भन्न सक्नुहुन्छ यो कथामा कतिवटा प्रिपोजिसन प्रयोग भयो. त्यसैले टिचिङ लिटरेचर इज अलवेज रिसोर्सफुल. When you teach one poem, one story, you can teach about passive voice, you can teach about preposition, you can talk about article, you can talk about type of sentences, you can talk about different things. त्यसैले एउटा कुरा पढाएर सयौं विषयहरूलाई ध्यान दिनको लागि we need to teach literature. A story, while teaching a story, you can teach 10 different things: article, preposition, voice, narration, positive verb, and all these things that are possible while teaching a single poem. That's why this is pre-reading activities. अब whenever you start reading, अब पढ्न सुरु गरे चाहिँ के गर्ने त? अब पढ्न सुरु गरे चाहिँ त्यही हो, कथा लाइन टु लाइन पढ्ने, विद्यार्थीलाई वर्ड अन्डरलाइन गर्ने, शब्दहरूको मिनिङ भन्दै जाने, ग्रामर स्ट्रक्चरहरू इन्ट्रोड्युस गराउँदै जाने विद्यार्थीहरूलाई. अर्को हामीले के गर्छौं त भन्दाखेरि while reading activities or during reading activities. While reading activities. While reading activities भनेको के हो त? Read story line by line. कथा line to line पढ्ने. Read story line by line. Read story line by line. त्यसपछि provide meaning of tough words. त्यसलाई हामी vocabulary भन्छौं. Provide meaning of tough words. टीचर को काम के हो त? Provide meanings of tough words. सबै tough word को meaning provide गर्नुस्. Provide meaning of tough words. Third step is, अब विद्यार्थीलाई के सिकाउनुस्? Ask and teach students about types of sentences. Sorry. Teach students about types of sentences, grammar structures, grammar structures and language functions. तपाईले story पढाइरहँदा विद्यार्थीहरूलाई grammar functions you can teach all about this. Teach students about types of sentences, grammar structures and language functions. These things are possible. त्यसपछि अर्को के गर्नुस्, ask every student to read it out. तपाईले सबै विद्यार्थीलाई पढ्न लाउनुस् ताकि उनीहरुको pronunciation चेक होस्. Ask every student to read some paragraphs. हरेक विद्यार्थीलाई at least एउटा प्याराग्राफ भनी पढ्न लाउनुस्. Ask every student to read some paragraphs. त्यसपछि conduct discussion about the story and its ideas. Ask a student to play role of a character. Role of a character. Ask every student to read some paragraphs. Conduct discussion about the story and its ideas. Ask a student to play the role of a character. यस्तो खालको कामहरु चाहिँ we can do it. त्यसैले यो सबै कुराहरु provide some questions and ask them to find out its answer. Find out its answer. यो लाइन तल पोस्ट ट्रेडिङमा पनि हुन्छ है. And find out their answers. यो कुराहरु चाहिँ के हो त जति लेखे पनि भयो. Teach students about types of sentences, grammar of structure and language function. Ask every student to read some paragraphs. Conduct discussion about the story and its ideas. Ask student to play role of a particular character and provide some questions and ask them to find out their answers. यो चाहिँ पढाइरहँदाखेरि के गर्नुहुन्छ त you can involve your students in all these things. You how to involve your students, how to teach त्यो चाहिँ के भयो त हामी during reading part. अब post reading मा जाउँ. Now move to post reading. Post reading भनेको you completed reading, you made meaning of them. तपाईले के गर्नुभयो सेम सिकाउनुभयो सबै त्यही हुन्छ. कविता स्टोरी यो एक्चुअली जाने भने सबै लिटरेचरको एउटै हो है. अब post reading activities. What are the post reading activities? Post reading activities. Post reading activities. अब यस्तो कुराहरुमा फिक्स्ड हुँदैन. कथा पढाउँदा पोस्ट रिडिङ के गर्ने? पोस्ट रिडिङ एक्टिभिटीज. राइट समरी अफ द स्टोरी. कथाको समरी लेख्न लानुहोस्. Ask students to write summary of the story. Summary of the story. You can ask your students to write summary of the story. This is one. Next one is compare characters. You can compare characters. Write review of the story. You can ask your students write review of the story. Story को review लेख्नु. Write review of the story. Talk about elements of the story in reference to it. In reference to this story. Next one is Briefly relate characters with events and events with actions. Ask students, अब विद्यार्थीहरुलाई अर्को के गर्न चाहिन्छ यो एक्टिभिटीहरु चाहिँ vocabulary related exercises. Okay. After reading, ask students to write summary of the story, compare characters, write review of the story, talk about elements of the story in reference to this story, briefly relate characters with events and events with action, and ask students to do some vocabulary related exercises. अब यस्तै कुराहरु हुन सक्छ. Which character is your favorite character? You can pose them different questions. विद्यार्थीहरुलाई अब हामी के गर्छौं त सुरुमा स्टोरी पढाइसकेपछि the moment you complete teaching story, you involve them in different activities. Write down summary of the story, retell the story, play the role of a particular character. How do you relate character with event and action? Write down the paraphrase of a given paragraph. Tell a story from your point of view. तपाईको point of view बाट story भन्नुस्. Imagine what happened later. त्यो कथा भन्दा पछाडी के भयो होला. Ask student to retell it. Do interview session in the classroom. Ask different questions to your students. That's why we can involve our students in these activities. Ask students to write summary of the story, compare characters, write review of the story, talk about elements of history in reference to this story, briefly relate characters with events and events with action. And the next one is ask students to do some vocabulary related exercises. These are the major ways of teaching story. Whenever we do these things, यो चाहिँ हाम्रो के हो त स्टोरी पढ्ने टेक्निक सकिन्छ है. ल भोलिको क्लासमा मैले दुईटा क्वेशन्सहरु हाउ टु टीच ड्रामा एन्ड हाउ टु टीच एसे. वी टक अबाउट दिस टु. भोलिको क्लासमा चाहिँ हाउ टु टीच ड्रामा एन्ड हाउ टु टीच एसे. ओके ल थ्यांक यू. सजिलो टपिक छ. नोट्सलाई लाइन टु लाइन पढौँ है. लाइन टु लाइन नोट्सहरु जति जनाले पाइसक्नु भएको छ सबैले लाइन टु लाइन त्यो नोट्सलाई पढौँ. सकिन्छ, त्यस्तो गाह्रो छैन. सजिलै सक्नुहुन्छ. धेरै जना छैन अब. प्रतिस्पर्धी पनि एकदमै कम छन्. ओके ल थ्यांक यू. ल छलफल गरौँला अब. सैटरडे र बिदाको दिनमा हामी छलफल सेसन गरौँ.
हेलो हेलो साथीहरु, नमस्कार नमस्कार है. अब नयाँ साथीहरु हुनुहुन्छ तपाईहरु कतिजना हैन. सबैजनाले तपाईहरुले भोलिसम्म एडमिसन पनि गर्नु होला.